So it's two sort of opening quotes, and then we'll talk. I'm already sweating. The whole of me is an unfurnished room, from the poem I Have Folded My Sorrows, from the book, the very first debut book of Kaufman's, called Solitudes Crowded with Loneliness. And then another quote, so that, the whole of me is an unfurnished room. And then the other quote is, the voice of the radio shouted, get up and do something to someone, but me and my son laughed in our furnished rooms. So let me just see if I can read it. It's about 10 pages. Hello and welcome. I'm your guide for a tour of the weird and unruly Golden Sardine, an oddity of a poetry collection located on any stalwart poetry lover's shelf. Few poems constitute a reading experience as simultaneously impromptu and composed. The collection consists of poems Bob Kaufman's friend, Mary Beach, found and edited for City Light Books in 1967. They lay in a briefcase retrieved after a fire in Bob Kaufman's apartment. Research suggests Bob Kaufman exchanged the poems this is me making this up, but it did happen around the same time. Research suggests Bob Kaufman exchanged the poems for the price of a plane ticket from New York's mental institution to San Francisco, where his wife and son awaited him. What was Kaufman's actual role in the order and editing of Golden Sardine? What holds the book together? His debut, Solitudes Crowded with Loneliness, as well as his third and final collection, The Ancient Rain, were published with new issues suggesting some contrasting, if unknown, editorial relationship in the publication of Golden Sardine. What does a stroll through the book reveal? Let's step inside. Immediately, the faint, ineffable smell of alien wind and the dust of a medicine man is detectable. Golden Sardine's foyer is crowded with voices. Carl Chessman interviews the PTA from death row. The Mothers of America are horrified by an enormous gas bill. Sheila and Heather Bell are around the corner. The most recognized poemy poem takes the shape of alien winds sweeping the highway in California afternoons. For the most part, though, Golden Sardine is powered by tidal power, the significant arithmetic of the remainder calendar that marks the filling of your hole in this American place. The high ceilings and woodwork are softly illuminated by the fire and low-key mantle candles with their wax pouring like solidified ink, creating something of the weird Gothic Edgar Allan Poe meets W.S. Burroughs style. We have tried to recreate the wildly handwriting on the wallpaper of Kaufman's consciousness. Born in April of 1925, his centennial will be next year, 7 of 13 children, born to a refined black Martinique school teacher and a half African-American, half German, half Jewish railroad Pullman porter. 9 times around the world as a merchant marine, tracked by the FBI for communist sympathies, subjected to electroshock therapy at Bellevue Hospital in New York, imprisoned at Rikers Island in New York, admitted at Langley Porter Psychiatric Hospital and Clinic, imprisoned at San Bruno Jail. The foyer emits a slippery, not quite welcoming tone, as if catching Kaufman off guard, waking from a post-happy hour dream. This 2-bedroom home has 0 square feet of living space, but has an infinite number of dancing feet per floor. Inhabited space transcends geometrical space, French philosopher Gaston Bachelard wrote in The Poetics of Space in 1958. Every corner in a house, he says, every angle in a room, every inch secluded space in which we like to hide or withdraw into ourselves is a symbol of solitude for the imagination. In Solitudes Crowded with Loneliness, the San Francisco poets are looking for an outplace, looking way out of place. Golden Sardine holds that out of place in that rare space between public and private address. It's a book of poems like a home that becomes a museum. Golden Sardine can feel like wandering a hastily abandoned home, a home which has been perhaps slightly arranged by a curator or tidied by a real estate agent, but a home where the poet has left signs of his existence etched in the wood and stone. I'm honored to take interested parties on a tour of a 3-dimensional time and relative domicile and song, saying, and speech acts. That's me trying to put the TARDIS in there, if you know what I'm talking about. You probably don't. We have attempted to reverse literalize as well as reconfigure Doctor Who, y'all, the figurative into figures of time and space to create an experience both educational and instructional for interested parties. Y'all ask me about it later. Construction of our golden sardine dwelling is the result of years of research and reading with intermittent installations of drunk time, heavy water dreams, and hearsay. The size and number of the rooms has been exaggerated. Before we begin, please grab a floor plan and number here in the gift shop. Everything in the gift shop can be purchased in exchange for a song or poem inspired by your experience. On the opposite side of the floor plan, a biography, a diagram of Kaufman house guests, people who influenced by him, and a legend of time in the space. Time appears regularly, obsessively in Golden Sardine. I share the center of time now as you gather your eyes and widen your ears. Let's see here. All the leaky-eyed poets know in their pores no one is guilty anything at any time. It is now summer for the 1 billionth consecutive time, discrete puddles seeping down the back of giant time. The literature of your suicide note is the significant arithmetic of the remainder calendar that marks the filling of your hole in this American place from which you have been gone a truly long time. In what time, for whom do we bleed? Lost notes from some jazz man's broken needle. The scene opens with dim silhouettes of animal sadness trapped in echo chambers of time. In sad times, hurt seabirds come to wail in ice, white wind alone, cutting off the edge of time to chant the song of time for us. Listen to the music of centuries rising above the mushroom time. Into forever tomorrows, black voyager, off to the time worlds of lifetimes ending, bending night. 7 floating lead moons, red up night skies, 7 twisted horns, mouth blown 7 times. Drunken memories weave in and out of past times, times of pear-shaped arguments of intent and purposes lost among crashing noises. I want to ask a terrifying question. What time is it going to be? 100% red-blooded savage would waste precious time. What 100% red-blooded savage would waste precious time listening to jazz with so many important things going on? The secret moments to which we admit to no one when guilty, we crawl back in time, reaching away from ourselves. So I'm trying to map that out in the house, but I think that's it. I'm not going to read you the other little thing unless there's time. Kaufman's sporadic, sometimes sprawling, unpunctuated all-caps passages are like the bristling flame in the foyer fireplace. All the leaky-eyed poets know in their pores no one is guilty of anything at any time, he writes in a satirical opening piece. When Kaufman writes of the leaky poets and the broad innocence of everyone all the time, he sets several motifs in motion. The self-portrait of the artist at home in his mind, and a meditation on the artist's poetical statement as a blend of the confessional witness, jazz, lyric, linguistics, and beatnikish mischief. According to folklore, the term beatnik was first used to describe Bob Kaufman, who was in the news and in jail for clashes with San Francisco police, clashes for his left-leaning politics in the era of McCarthyism, clashes for his interracial marriage, an infant in late 50s America, clashes for his poems. Forgive me, I'm a big trunk of gold sardines. Golden Sardine lives rent-free in his fans. Just between the entrance and living space, you'll find Bob Kaufman's grandfather clock stands like a tree slowly winding its arms, or like a tree pretending to be a cop. Fans familiar with Solitudes may recall the poem, Grandfather Was Queer Too. That poem, by the way, is more shapely than almost anything in Golden Sardine. Grandfather Was Queer Too has a regular stanza length and rhyme scheme. Take turns observing the wood carving around the face of the grandfather clock. The grandfather escapes into the same Louisiana, Texas, Arizona, California landscapes as the poet. In many obvious ways, the debut edited by Eileen Kaufman amid the poet's stints in state institutions is more crafted. Bagel Shop Jazz is a definitive benchmark example of a jazz poem. Solitudes is an interspatial mobile home that becomes an insular and singular as a golden sardine tin after eviction, incarceration, shock therapy, and a vow of silence. I digress. I can see some of you are heading for the water closet or beginning to study book spines. The bookshelves throughout the house, by the way, are lined with countless varieties of books and able to expand to accept new and forthcoming books. We continue to test a hypnotic household aromatherapy, which mixes the smells of tobacco and permanent ink and whiskey. As we enter the living room, you may notice an hourglass sits on the bookshelf with discrete puddles of time seeping down its back. The true and very needed scholarly study of Bob Kaufman is left to the scholars working in our attic with the sometimes cool, sometimes hot air of literary theory. Also, we will only have a peek at Kaufman's basement, which is the foundation storing the German, New Orleans Jewish Catholic roots and plentiful personal baggage. The basement, as you know, also holds Bob Kaufman's furnace, his fuse box, his water tank. We'll leave those parts of Golden Sardine to the solitary, mostly ineffable experience of reading the poems alone. Through the curtains of the living room come tall strips of light, blues slant into blueness. In old jazz memoir, Jazz, Don't You Listen to It at Your Own Risk, the poet asks what 100% red-blooded savage would waste precious time listening to jazz. Those who'd like to spend some time with Kaufman's record collection may catch up later for a poem. In the near future, we will invite poets to be in figurative conversation with Bob Kaufman. The living room will be for social gatherings for the living and dead, though Golden Sardine, perpetual living room seances are not about the dead as much as conjuring the love-divided corners of home, the lonely poet corners of poetry, the yardbird corners of life. Living invitees include, of course, Kaufman's Louisiana cousin, Yusuf Komunyakaa. Materials for Komunyaka's living room seance include a reading of his Letter to Bob Kaufman poem, Naturally. You know what, let me see. I got audio of him reading it, but I think I'm gonna just pretend to be him. Let's see. Letter to Bob Kaufman by Yusuf Komunyakaa. The gold dust of your voice and 25 cents can buy a cup of coffee. We sell pain for next to nothing. Nope. You don't know me, but your flesh and blood language lingers in my head like treason and raw honey. I read Golden Sardine and danced a kalinda to come to myself. Needles, booze, high steppers with dangerous eyes. Brother, believe this, we're dice in a hard time hustle. No more handfuls of meat. Come on, play the dozens, you root worker, you neo-Buddhist, you earth lover, you whole card peeper. We know roads dusty with old griefs and hot kiss joys. Bloodhounds await ambush. Something, perhaps the scent of love, draws them closer. A cup of coffee, preferably with gold dust and cinnamon sprinkled on top, symbolizing voice, will be needed for the seance. A hard-working needle symbolizing revolution and vulnerability, and a pair of dice. It's extremely likely Bob Kaufman will join us on our tour of Golden Sardine. Given his fabled decade-long vow of silence and habit of disappearing, we never know when he's actually here. I am not a form, I am me, he writes in blue slanted into blueness. But believe this, brother, we're dice in a hard time hustle, Komunyakaa writes back in his letter to Bob Kaufman. Visitors are welcome to address a letter to Bob Kaufman after Komunyakaa. Just off the living room, Kaufman's dine-in kitchen is a semi-improvisational, meta-surreal showpiece with roomy cabinets, the poet's lost window over the sink, and a bay window over the stove overlooking a backyard filled with readers and house guests and neighbors in an eternal cookout. The kitchen is the heart and soul of Golden Sardine, where all the sensory details, all the sounds and sights of the poems originate. Its floors resound with the slap of naked feet. Krudi Sango, which is the name of a poem, Drunk Time, Jazz Chick, Tequila Jazz, O Jazz O. On the wall is a cuckoo clock, which has been carved into the shape of his friend Jack Kerouac's head. At the top of each hour, out comes a narrow black road where a tiny Kerouac stands with his thumb exposed. Heavy Water Blues is the most anthologized of Kaufman's kitchen sink poems as he tries to capture the whole of his feeling in real time. Visitors are invited to sit at the dining room table to complete a figurative language quiz exercise with the poem. For example, he says, my neighbors are drunken linguists and I speak butterfly. Provide one fake fact about a neighbor and your insect language. In the kitchen of Golden Sardine, great sounds and senses clash and bang, creating something to feed us even when we do not know what we are eating. He says, I put my eyes on a diet. My tears are gaining too much weight. What feeling would you put on a diet? Where did you go in a dream? What is your favorite takeout order? Describe what's in your pocket. This feeling of responding to a world he cannot change or respond to runs through much of Kaufman's work. Paranoia and anger mixed with longing and philosophical whimsy. A similar writer, Wanda Coleman's Heavy Daughter Blues for Yusuf Komunyakaa, centers Kaufman in womanhood and reversals and in even more wicked wickedness. Where the radio is teaching his goldfish, the TV is teaching her children. She writes, I am in love with a dope fiend who sleeps under freeways. She adapts the poem's animated manic associations of paranoia and passionate writing. Writing at the end, my girl child and me cackle joyfully in the kitchen as we make cookies for the party of the world. So y'all got no reason not to do that one now. That's an easy imitation. Heavy Water Blues. Are y'all keeping track? That's the second one. Keeping track of these exercises? That's the second one. Bob Kaufman's Trickster Poetics, the letter to Bob Kaufman, and now the Heavy Water something. Bob Kaufman's Trickster Poetics are not quite surreal, not quite black vernacular, not quite jazz. His poetics are mercurial lyric existentialism, or a Camusian absurdism. The Apollinarian surrealists of unhistorical events are mocked. They were never bribed by policemen, never experienced jazz, never laughed with steel teeth, or suffered poverty. His social political activism flickers through the perversity of a conscientious trickster, a Promethean flamethrower. That is to say, the poems can be jaded by politics, but enlivened by his spirit. In Hardwood Alley Song, after his San Francisco address, which the city of San Francisco later renamed Bob Kaufman Street, offers a winking, pinching vignette of his uncompromising slipperiness, remnants of neo-jazz witch doctors hugging jagged missives of flame-sheeted bone, affecting space cures on curved people. God, you are just an empty refrigerator with a dead child inside, incognito in the debris of a modern junk pile. The punchline jabs, pokes recall a story about Bob Kaufman mentoring Richard Pryor the years that Richard Pryor lived there. We gotta talk about this. In San Francisco, around the Summer of Love and the Vietnam War. Certainly Kaufman's humor might inflict and imbue a reader with a kind of priorness. One feels it's okay to laugh at oneself. One feels it's okay to laugh at oneself and one's art. Because I don't know, I was looking it up and I'm like, where did I get that from? But he was there. He was there at the same time. He lived in San Francisco for anyway, whatever. Before we proceed upstairs, please note our water closet is designated for breaks, disposals, and alterations. The stairs themselves will lift us from common language to the text of every day, to the subliminal, the planes of the personal, the naked, and the unconscious. It is a plane governed by alarm clock, atomic clock, and internal clock. The bedroom is the most private and vulnerable space. The room is illuminated by a large lost window that absorbs and emits light from both sides of the glass like a transparent sundial. I'm excited to say Harriet Mullen will appear in the bedroom for a discussion of Bob Kaufman and Sleeping with the Dictionary. Sleeping with the Dictionary speech acts are transformed into diurnal ritual and nocturnal practice, where the dictionary is both a guidebook and a book of spells. And she's doing it. I do love Harriet. So I could probably do a better job reading her in this thing. Sleeping with the Dictionary, I'm just going to read the beginning of it. I beg to dicker with my silver-tongued companion whose lips are ready to read my shining gloss. A versatile partner, conversant and well-versed in the verbal art, the dictionary is not averse to the solitary habits of the curiously wide-awake reader. In the dark night's insomnia, the book is a stimulating sedative, awakening my tired imagination to the hypnagogic trance of language. So that tone there is cool. Where her fellow West Coast sister Wanda Coleman channels Kaufman's Trickster Poetics through formal deployments, Mullen channels his linguistic whimsy through word excavations. Both women are particularly important in light of Kaufman's influence and depictions of women. We may also ask her to host a fireside chat with the ghost of Eileen Kaufman and a reading by Jane Cortez. Waiting, a baby is waiting, waiting to be born. I wish that whoever is inside me would stop all that moving around. We imagine many visitors seek intimate experiences with familiar or favorite poems such as Heavy Water Blues or Around Midnight in the bedroom, but suggest a cool, moderately erotic interaction with diction in a Liszt poem like On. The incantatory On suggests Golden Sardine is organized not around narrative or pickups, but around principles of repetition, refrain, paranoia, and obsession. On the corner of now and yesterday, on yardbird corners of embryotic hopes, on yardbird corners of Parker flights to sound, filled pockets in space, on neural corners of stripped brains and desperate electrosurgeons, on love-divided corners of die now and pay later mortuaries, on lonely poet corners of low-lying leaves and moist prophet eyes. Research finds the obsessive catalog rhythms of the bedroom are best channeled through the mouth. Best to get things which you don't y'all see what I'm saying. Pull words from On like articles of clothing from the closet. embryonic, cornflakes, these are words that are in the poem, cornflakes, tailored, intellect, anesthesia, theological, static, ice cream, seduction, guitars, ritual. Y'all ain't writing them down, you gotta make a poem. Mortuary, semantic, desperados, you can ask me later. You'll be given 10 minutes to rearrange these words into your own anaphoric place poem. Reading and writing have something to do with the wardrobe of ghosts, research has indicated. I climb a red thread to an unseen existence. Where the water closet is a guest bathroom for public privacies, the private bathroom is a secret space for vulnerabilities and time to ourselves. The private bathroom is the most open and closed space of any home. Speaking of red thread, let us look at Slight Alterations, an intimate self-portrait as home kind of ars poetica by Bob Kaufman. Slight Alterations. I climb a red thread to an unseen existence, broken free somewhere beyond the belts. Ticks have abandoned my astonished time. The air littered with demolished hours, presence abolished. I become a ray from the sun, anonymous finger deflected into hungry windows, boomerang of curved light, ricocheted off dark walls. The ceiling remembers my face. The floor is a palette of surprise, watching me eat the calendar. So y'all can see his obsession with time. It'll stop in a minute. Okay. Those who have visited the downstairs water closet know Kaufman's likeness has been painted upon the ceiling of our unisex stall, creating something of a Sistine Chapel effect. This is in the bathroom. With accompanying neck aches and eye strains. The lines on the ceiling weave and bind into a canopy of ink, hooding readers in clouds of awe and solar contemplation. Kaufman envelops us, possesses us as we thumb, as Mary Beach must have thumbed through the fiery, flame-resistant pages of Golden Sardine. If in the apartment fire, his clothing, his photo album, his Merchant Marine ID card, his elementary school drawings, and birth certificate were destroyed, in his poems, everything survives. Kaufman's second-floor office study just after the bedroom at the top of the stairs may seem redundant in a house full of books. The study of Golden Sardine is a library of words, sounds, a time chamber, the center of every world. Current disciple and resident is City Lights poet Tongo Eisen Martin. Eisen Martin is one of many poets who find themselves in Bob Kaufman's books. I found myself there too. A title from Blood on the Floor, his second book, points to the possibility of being one person. In The Possibility of Being One Person, Eisen Martin writes, I had this dream planted dead in a weekday that I was laid up in the hospital and people kept coming into my room by the dozens and each dozen had special handshakes for the other and occasionally current dance moves like they were dancing for a white sundial marked numbness in their feet drum race riot, end quote. The poem holds dream and reality in a personal breath. Disciples of the Order of Golden Sardine live in degrees of provocative interiority and activism. In Eisen Martin's sketch about genocide, a San Francisco police chief says, yes, you poets make points, but they are silly. A beat later, change of plans, both sides of the nonviolence. A baton's beatniking reverberates across time around the clock. Eisen Martin's poems are rooted in real-time witness. I haven't been eating, mama. I've been in a trance. I haven't been sleeping. Many poets who find themselves in Bob Kaufman's books find themselves here. Many poets, maybe many more black poets, have passed through San Francisco in search of Kaufman's haunts, hideouts, and holding patterns. Kaufman haunts the corners of our space. He sits at an invisible upright piano around midnight. Dream and drum dance into a very real, consequential reality. Those who would like some time for a word or two with Kaufman, make your way to designated writing areas of the Golden Sardine. It's possible the poet will be peeking over your shoulder, whispering in your ear. It's also possible the crashing noise of America drowns out his breath. The letter to the editor that ends Golden Sardine reads, gentlemen arriving, this is the last thing that they have in the Golden Sardine, which we can talk about. It's a letter to the editor. Gentlemen arriving back in San Francisco to be greeted by blacklist and eviction. I am writing these lines to the responsible non-people. And man, that non-people resonates. It burns white hot, says Terrance. The next sentence, though, is one thing is certain, I am not white. Thank God for that. This is what he says in the letter. One thing is certain, I am not white. Thank God for that. It makes everything else bearable, quote unquote. The letter almost reads as a prank and language poem. Readers may wonder about the recipient's response. It is written in response to eviction, relentless despair, existential melancholia. It is a show of vibrant, wisecracking resistance, laying claim to living room, dream room, privacy, and the noise of people gathering around the garden and barbecue pit of the poet's mind. The final letter also foreshadowed his withdrawal from the public. In the preface to his collection, his last collection, Ancient Rain, Poems from 1956 to 1978, published in 81, after he came out of his vow of silence, he says, I want to be anonymous. I don't know how you get involved with uninvolvement, but I don't want to be involved. My ambition is to be completely forgotten. Bob Kaufman is a kind of proto-OG Basquiat, the outsider, trickster, visionary American autodidact. His golden sardine shows us how to find shelter in poems. Those of you who have completed a poem during our tour can follow me downstairs now. Enduring poverty and displacement with an already baked-in restless reclusiveness meant Kaufman never enjoyed the comforts of his own home after the eviction. He died of emphysema in San Francisco in 1986 in a hotel. He is one of our best, most pure examples of what it means to be oneself in language. He displays the poetics of a shipwrecked hitchhiker, a stoned and rooted rolling stone with the home in mind. We ultimately hope many young and established writers of many stripes and poetics will both visit and speak on what poems mean to them here and in their own dwellings. You may exit Golden Sardine for a poem. Please find space to begin if you have not yet begun.